Even research shows that 85% of brain development happens before the age of 6. Play is now a policy. So quality in preschool is not about the air-conditioned classrooms or the marble flooring or the host of co-curricular activities that preschools offer. Quality, according to me, is what happens between an educator and the child every single day in the classroom. A child who is insecure or anxious will never learn.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Preschool Playbook by Hubble Explorers.
The Preschool Playbook, a Hubble Explorers podcast.
I'm Arya, and I'm truly happy to welcome you all to our very first podcast. When we hear the words early years learning, we often picture tiny chairs, colorful classrooms, storybooks, rhymes, and little kids learning their alphabet. Aren't those moments beautiful? But beneath all of that learning lies something that is deeper in meaning. The early years are where confidence begins to take shape for the children. That's why we created the Preschool Playbook Hubble Explorers, a space for honest conversations about the world of early childhood beyond the worksheets, beyond the routines, and beyond what we usually see on the surface. In this series, we will sit down with educators, school leaders, experts, and inspiring voices to talk about the questions, challenges, ideas, and stories that truly matter. Because shaping young minds isn't a small task, and conversations around early learning deserves care, depth, and attention. So whether you're a parent, teacher, educator, or someone who simply believes in the power of childhood, welcome. We are so glad you're here. Let's begin. This is the Preschool Playbook by Hubble Explorers. And now, let's welcome our very first guest, Ms. Aanchal Vasandani, Senior Vice President, Content at Hubble Explorers. Hello, Ms. Aanchal. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Arya. Even I'm very happy to be here and be a part of this show and talk about something that I'm really passionate about.
Absolutely.
So let's begin.
Yeah. So, Ms. Aanchal, I think one of the most pressing questions that I would like to ask you is that India is seeing a massive rise in preschool. Why do you think early childhood education is important?
So early childhood is that phase which is very critical for human development. Even research shows that 85% of brain development happens before the age of 6, thus laying the foundation of what a child will learn as well as navigate the world in future. Secondly, and the most important thing is today there's a lot of awareness and policies to back this up. Our National Education Policy 2020 was pivotal in making early childhood education as a foundation for all future education. Also, this was followed up by our National Curriculum Framework 2022, which gave a research-backed framework which helps preschools to know what to teach and how a child develops. Along with this, today parents have become very aware, so they're not looking just for school as safe spaces to leave their children. They're asking questions like, how will my child learn? What will my child learn? Will my child become confident? So definitely the whole society, the mindset is changing. Research also shows that investment in early childhood gives a long-term returns in future. Therefore, I think a lot of preschools are now opening up because there's a lot of policy backing as well as awareness in the society.
Building on that, I just wanted to also ask you that for many who may not know, what has NEP 2020 really changed for preschools in India?
So NEP 2020 has brought about genuinely a major shift in the education system. Now, early education or the foundational stage is formally a part of our Indian education system, which was earlier not recognized. So this NEP 2020 has given very important policies, and one of the major one is play is now a policy. So in schools, children are not supposed to be just kept busy or made to write and read before they're ready. The next thing is mother tongue. So NEP 2020 insists that this teaching learning has to happen in the mother tongue or the home language of the child. Because when a child is learning in any other language, the child is learning a new language as well as new concepts. And this the child does not comprehend easily, and therefore the child is not well engaged in the classroom. The next important thing is assessments. Assessments have to be holistic. The child, it does not have to be pen, paper, and grading of the child. It has to be continuous observation based assessments. This is again assessment for learning. This is to inform the teacher that how she can improvise, modify her teaching in order to suit how a child learns in the classroom. Also, a new initiative by the government was a Nipun Bharat, which was released along with the NEP 2020. This aims at children achieving foundational literacy and numeracy by grade 3, which means that all preschools now need to focus on pre-literacy and pre-numeracy skills.
That's really amazing, Miss Aanchal. I have to say that I think the reforms that NEP 2020 has come up with is really going to do wonders to preschool, not only to preschool children, but to the teachers and all stakeholders like parents as well. I think it's much needed and it's come at the right time as well. Building on that and building on what an essence of a preschool is, if you had to define simply what quality in preschool means, what would it be?
So quality in preschool is not about the air-conditioned classrooms or the marble flooring or the host of co-curricular activities that preschools offer. Quality, according to me, is what happens between an educator and the child every single day in the classroom. So quality is basically the kind of warmth or the responsiveness of the teacher, the kind of communication, conversations she has with the child, and the way she nurtures a child's curiosity rather than diverting it. All this defines quality. So I would put quality under 3 dimensions. The first one would be the learning environment. So as we know, the environment is a third teacher. So the environment has to be such that the children can freely explore, touch, and use those materials in different ways. The second one would be the emotional environment. I think this is very, very important. Today we focus a lot on physical environment, but we neglect the emotional environment. A child who is insecure or anxious will never learn. So definitely a child who feels safe and can voice his opinions, talk freely to the teacher, and get the correct response from the teacher is always ready to learn and happy coming to school. And the third dimension, I would say, is the pedagogy. Very important. It is how the teacher teaches in class, whether she's using play-based, experiential learning as modes of learning, whether it is a child-led learning where children are taking their learning forward, not just passive learners in the classroom. So this is a third dimension, which is again very, very important. So quality is not about early writing or early reading. I think quality is when every child coming to school is happy and safe.
Yeah. That's very true, Miss Aanchal. I think building on what you said rather, is that these things sound so simplistic in nature, but they are so important. The learning environment, the pedagogies, most importantly, the emotional aspect of a child growing up. It really matters a lot. And I'm so glad that, we are looking towards it. We are working towards it. We are getting more information on that as well.
So Arya, even at Hubble Explorers, we focus a lot on quality, not only in the curriculum, but also in teacher training. Yes. We ensure that we are equipping teachers with the skills as well as the tools which can help them to improvise their teaching in the classroom.
Yes, that's very true. I think it's so important to get your teachers in it as well, because eventually your teachers are the ones who are going to be molding children and molding their future, right? What are the biggest gaps you have seen in how preschool operate or deliver in India?
So as we discussed, there's a lot of awareness. We also have the policy, the National Education Policy. But despite all this, we've seen a lot of gaps, because it is actually putting that into practice is where the challenge lies. So some of the major gaps is rushing into academics. So there are many preschools who are expecting children aged 3 to write using pencils or any other writing tool. Again, we need to keep in mind that these children are not yet ready. developmentally ready because their fine motor skills haven't developed, and giving them a writing tool this early will actually lead to anxiety and them not being happy coming to school.
Correct.
So this is rushing into academics. Then the next gap that we've seen often is about, as I told you earlier, also about assessments. Preschools are focusing on children writing tests and grading them. So assessments is not about grading these children. These children are actually in the developmental stage. So here they are developing their different skills across the different domains. So assessing them means actually the teacher needs to see how well the child is progressing across the developmental continuum rather than grading them and giving them marks. And another important gap that we've noted is schools are not prioritizing social emotional learning. This is in fact very, very critical because this is the foundational stage where children learn to develop confidence, empathy, and building relationships with other children and their peers.
Right.
So I feel these are the gaps that we need to address and move ahead.
Right. So true, I would also like to just pitch in and add and say that every child develops at their own pace. Every child has their own milestone.
So true.
Their own journey to take. And another thing is that social emotional is so important. I think it's just in the past few years that it's gained traction. But if you really think about it, growing up, I don't think we were given the opportunity to value it as much as it is being valued now. And you can see that in how our children sort of react to things, how they react to situations, how they look at problems, how they view
How they
problems.
resolve conflicts.
Right, conflict resolutions and everything. And that is something that I think we need to be equipped as educators, as stakeholders, and take that, further on.
These are actually human skills.
Correct,
Very, very
correct.
critical.
They are life skills. They are so important because that's how your future is built, right? Building on to that, and moving on to the next question, how important do you think, Ms. Aanchal, it is to have an NEP aligned curriculum in ensuring consistency and meaningful learning across classrooms?
It is absolutely critical, but often, Arya, this word structured is misunderstood. People interpret structured as rigid timetables or scripted lesson plans. But a well-structured NEP aligned curriculum means a curriculum that is progressive as well as spiral.
Correct.
It needs to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. Then NCF 2022 has defined our learning outcomes under the 5 domains of development. That is language development, social emotional development, physical development, cognitive development, as well as creative aesthetic development. Now these cannot be treated as isolated subjects. So whenever there is any activities done, these need to be purposefully weaving in and integrating these skills across all the domains. So this is what we call as a well-structured NEP aligned curriculum.
It's so important to have it all integrated, right? I mean, like you said, not everything works in isolation, and that's just how a preschool child is. As they're growing, they don't work only in isolation. You have a child who may like doing physical activities as well as someone who's musically inclined as well. It's good to have a curriculum which kind of, encompasses everything, all of these different,
So Arya, our Astralis, the Illuminated Minds curriculum at Hubble Explorers, is fully aligned with NEP, as well as it allows the teachers to use their own creativity.
Right. I think it's so important because teachers also come with their own set of, they come with their own understanding of what they want to do in the class and how they want to go about with their children, right? And it's important to sort of incorporate that as well, in it. And then moving on to teachers, just as we were talking about it, I think this is something which I also personally feel about is teacher development. Teacher development is often spoken about quite a lot, but what does effective preschool teacher development actually look like in a preschool?
So this is something I feel very strongly about. So the quality of a preschool is the quality of the educator in the classroom and how the educator interacts with the children every single day. You may have the best infrastructure and the well-crafted curriculum. However, if the educator is not empowered, the quality in education will not happen.
Correct.
So effective teacher training, in my experience, has to be continuous professional development. It cannot happen just once at the start of the academic year. It has to be weaved in throughout the year in small doses where the teacher can implement what they have been trained on, reflect on her teaching, and then move ahead. Next, it has to be relevant. It has to cater to the kind of pedagogies that she requires in teaching in the early childhood classrooms. It has to equip her with the skills, how to assess the children, how to observe them, how to record those observations, the anecdotal observations. The next part of training is which is very critical is on early childhood pedagogies. Here, how to use play-based as well as experiential learning, activity-based to make her curriculum child-centric, to weave in purposeful activities which cater to development of domains. So all this are important aspects. Also, another important aspect of teacher training is communication with parents. I think how the teacher needs to communicate to the parents, how the children are in the classroom, as well as have that open communication where the parents can also voice out their feedback about the child and the teacher can guide the parents. All this needs to be a part of their training.
I think from whatever you've said and whatever I could gather, if I had to summarize it, is that a very important quality that a teacher should have is self-reflection. I think then everything else sort of, falls into place after that, on what her day looks like, what her children look like, how she should communicate with the parents as well, because I know that there are so many parents who come and they have so many thoughts going on and challenges and all these sorts of things going on in their mind, and a teacher who is able to communicate well while also being reflective really helps the communication go forward in a better and in a more productive way, right?
So true.
So it's very important. I mean, as a parent, I would want a teacher who would probably have that kind of communication with me as well, So building on to that and whatever we've spoken about right now and going on to the next question, suppose if I were a preschool owner and if I wanted to build a future-ready school, what are the 3 things that I would have to get absolutely right?
So Arya, I would frame it as people, pedagogy and partnerships. People are the educators that preschools would hire. They need to invest in the educators, that is the people, because they are the ones who are actually going to implement and teach in the classroom. So I think that is an important aspect that they need to focus on. The second one would be pedagogy. I think I've talked extensively about it. So we need to have the play-based, the activity-based, child-centric, where the activities are purposeful, ensuring holistic development of the child. And the third one, but not the least, is partnerships. Here I'm talking about parents and this partnership between parents and the preschool. So parents are very, very important stakeholders in a child's journey of learning. So here we need to ensure that the partnership has to be very transparent. The communication has to be fluid and continuous. So these are the 3 important aspects that preschools need to keep in mind.
Yeah. The 3 important P's, I would rather say.
The 3 P's,
It's the 3 important P's to go ahead with creating a preschool. I think there's just so much work that goes in it, and I think partnership is extremely important, that understanding that a parent, the understanding between the preschools as well. And so just going forward to the next question, technology now is a big thing, with AI coming across. And I mean, children all over, as much as you try to limit their screen time, it's impossible because they are going to be affected by it. I think we as educators need to know how to sort of, walk that line between what is good technology and what is, not the right amount for children, So as technology is evolving in every domain, how is it impacting preschool?
So Arya, this is again, as you said, the most discussed topic.
Correct.
Whether preschoolers should be given gadgets in the hand or whether they should have screen time. So I think technology definitely in early years cannot replace the real life connections that children require.
Absolutely.
As well as the human interactions. But definitely there are certain concepts which they do not, abstract concepts that they do not see in the immediate environment. Such things can be taught through audiovisuals. So, NCF 2022 explicitly endorses in its learning outcomes on technology that children show attention and regulation while interacting with digital resources. And also, they use technology or gadgets under the supervision of a teacher. So, definitely, digital resources cannot replace human intervention. We know that these children learn best through real world connections and hands on learning, but definitely these digital resources can complement learning.
Correct. I think it's understanding how to tweak digitals and how to make it best suited for us and for our children rather than looking at it as something that is negative and harmful to our children. Finding that balance because children do learn. There are various methods and we have to keep up with the times. So, this is one of it. This has been such an insightful conversation, Ms. Aanchal. I think it's really brought into perspective what preschool educators and what preschool owners should really consider and think about before starting a preschool. If there was one specific message for preschool owners and educators, what would it be? What would you like to suggest?
So, my message is that these preschool owners are doing the most important task. They are dealing with early learners, they are the brain builders, and it is their goal to take forward and build skills that are going to help these children to become global citizens and successful people in future. So they need to focus upon building the critical thinking skills, the confidence, the creativity, as well as the communication. All these skills need to be built so that our children are ready for the 21st century. So the next important thing that I would like to tell them is that they need to move beyond school readiness. They need to focus on competency and not content. This will actually help the child to be engaged and happy coming to school daily.
Thank you so much for this, Ms. Aanchal. I think the key takeaway that I would personally take from this is brain builders and building children for tomorrow and kind of equipping them with different core competencies and life skills. It's important for preschools to remember that. And I'm sure after this podcast and after this conversation that we've had, that they are also going to leave with this knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Arya. It was a pleasure being here.